Hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine, and this is your Rattlecast for Tuesday, January 28th. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, we have a great guest for you today. We have an open line segment afterwards, so I hope you participate in the prompt and join in for that. Kathleen Balma is our poet today, but first, we always like to do a warm-up poem while everybody trickles in, and we make sure the feed's working. And I have my phone on mute, which was a bit of a delay there. There we go. First of all, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. There's a reason we have to say that, but it's a secret. And now today for the warm-up poem, as everybody trickles in and finds a comfy place to sit, I thought we would do... Now this poem might get us a copyright notice. We'll see. I don't know if Patricia Smith has this poem on a CD anywhere, but we'll see. This is... the warm-up poem today. If you don't know who Patricia Smith is, of course you really should. She's won pretty much every award there is, or been a finalist. She's been a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. She's a 5-time Slam Poetry champion, and she also was the winner of the Rattle Poetry Prize several years ago. This is a poem of hers from issue number 27 to warm us up. This is Building Nicole's Mama, and this issue, number 27, featured this poem with a CD in the back of the issue, which is always fun. And those are still available if anybody's interested in picking up a copy. There's about, it's an hour-long tribute to slam poetry CD, which was really cool to do. And we interviewed Patricia for this issue too. And this is her poem here, Building Nicole's Mama.
This is a poem for the 6th grade class at Lily C. Evans Elementary School in Dade County, Miami, which they made me promise to say every time I did the poem. I am astonished at their mouthful names. Lacanicia, Chevalane, DeLeo, Fumaleo. Their ragged rebellions and lip gloss pouts and all those pants drooped as drapery. I rejoice when they kiss my face, whisper wet and urgent in my ear, make me their obsession because I have brought them poetry. They shout me raw, bruise my wrist with their pulling, and brashly claim me as mama as they cradle my head in their little laps, waiting for new words to grow in my mouth. You. Angry, jubilant, weeping poets. We are all saviors, reluctant hosannas in the limelight. But you knew that, didn't you? So let us bless this 6th grade class. 40 cracking voices, 40 nappy heads, and all of them raise their hands when I ask. They have all seen the Reaper, grim in his heavy robe, pushing the button for the Dead Project elevator, begging for a break at the corner pawn shop, cackling wildly in the back pew of the Baptist church. I ask the death question, and 40 fists punch the air. Me! An O'Neill matchstick crack child watched his mother's body become a claw. And 9-year-old Tico Jefferson, barely big enough to lift the gun, fired a bullet into his throat when Mama bended his back with a lead pipe. Tamika cried into a sofa pillow when Daddy blasted Mama into the north wall of their cluttered one-room apartment. Danya's cousin, gone in a drive-by. Dark window, click, click, gone, says Danya, her tiny finger a barrel, the thumb a hammer. I am astonished at their losses. And yet, when I read a poem about my own hard-eyed teenager, Jeffrey asks, is he dead yet? Cannot be comprehended. An 18-year-old still pushing and pulling his own breath. And 40 faces pity me, knowing that I will soon be as they are, numb to our bloodied histories, favoring the Reaper with a thumbs up and a wink, hearing the question and shouting, me, Miss Smith, I know somebody dead. Can poetry hurt us, they ask me, before crawling into my words to sleep? I love you, Nicole says. Nicole wearing my face, pimples peppering her nose, and she is as black as angels are. Nicole's braids kissed with match flame to seal them. And can you teach me to write a poem about my mama, Miss Smith? I mean, you write about your daddy, and he's dead. Can you teach me to remember my mama? A teacher tells me this is the first time Nicole has admitted that her mother is gone. Murdered by slim silver needles and a stranger rifling through her blood, the virus pushing her skeleton through for Nicole to see. And now this child with rusty knees and mismatched shoes sees poetry as her scream and asks me for the words to build her mother again, replacing the voice, stitching on the lost flesh. So poets, as we take the stage, as we flirt and sin and rejoice behind microphones, remember Nicole. She knows that we are here now, and she is an empty vessel waiting to be filled. And she is waiting. And she is waiting. And she waits.
So that was Patricia Smith reading her poem Building Nicole's Mama from Rattle number 27. You can hear why she's a 4-time slam poetry champion in that poem. And also, if you were reading along, it's really interesting to note how some of the changes are made throughout the poem. Little lines change, little words and phrases change. And that was one of the fascinating things about doing that slam poetry issue back in 2007 when it came out. That was a long time ago. At least it feels like that, 13 years. But every single one of the poems that we published, the audio did not match the text. And because it evolves over time, and people perform their poems sort of in a constant workshop where they're always tweaking and tinkering. So that's always interesting to see. All right, so let's move on to today's poet. And as always, thanks so much for joining us. Before I say anything else, please do know that you can leave comments for today's poet, Kathleen Balma, in the comments section of YouTube if you'd like, and in the chat window, I should say, and I'll pass those along. And please do, no matter where you're listening to this, whether it's iTunes or Facebook or YouTube or Stitcher or whatever the heck else, there's so many, I can't even remember them. Like literally, I have to look at a list and I don't have it in front of me. But no matter where you're watching this, please do click the like button. Tell your friends about the show if you enjoy it, and that is how poetry spreads around social media, and we all get to enjoy it a lot more when you do that. So please do click the like button and subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you remember that our shows are going on and all that kind of cool stuff. And thanks so much for doing that. So today's poet is one second here. Today's poet is Kathleen Balma. She's the author of Gallimaufry Farrago, which is this beautiful chapbook. I love the cover art from Finishing Line Press. And let me just read her bio right in the back of this issue here, or this chapbook. Kathleen Balma is a Fulbright Fellow, teacher, librarian, and translator from every U.S. state you never wanted to visit. Her writing awards include a Pushcart Prize and a Writer-in-Residence Fellowship from Rivendell Writers Colony. She lives in New Orleans, and here she is, Kathleen Balma. Hello, Kathleen. How you doing tonight?
Hi, I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. And you're in New Orleans, right?
Yeah, I am.
That is one place that I would love to visit and never have. Have you lived there like your whole life? I think it said...
No. I grew up in Southern Illinois, and I've lived a lot of places, but I moved here by choice. I want to say 2015 I moved here. Mm-hmm. That seems right. Just because I wanted to, which is usually why I move places. And I fell in love with it and didn't want to leave, which is what happens to a lot of people who come here visiting.
Yeah, it feels like one of those places that, I mean, just from a distance, having never actually been there, it feels like one of those places that actually has a culture, which like nowhere else does. But maybe that's just my imagination.
It has a really unique culture, and not only that, it's a big city that feels like a small town in terms of just how lovely and friendly and warm people are. It's really nice. Having grown up in a small town, to live somewhere in an urban area where people will smile and say hi to you and wave and make small talk. And I lived in the East Coast for a while, and I really missed small talk. So yeah, it's a really beautiful place, and the weather is perfect for me. I can't get too hot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I was going along with you until I mean I love the small town thing, but I need some seasons. I need some some dry air and
We have seasons, but you do have to be able to take the heat.
yeah, that is not me. I grew up in Western New York, and then I lived in LA for a little bit and moved up to the mountains because I couldn't stand the perpetual summer.
Okay.
So do you want to read a poem to start out with from the
Sure.
book, or whatever you want to read? I don't want to.
The first poem I'm going to read is called What the Traveler Knows, and if you're following along in the chapbook, that's on page 15.
Okay, cool, thanks.
What the Traveler Knows. Every country is a cure for something. Every cobblestone a lozenge for some scratchy sore spot in your pedestrian head. Every skyline a pointy heavenscape of exclamation marks, cheering you on. If you are irksome and rude in your own land, there is another where you are witty and direct. Your voice, once a pastel wine, now an atonal woodwind of desire. If you are hideous in your hometown, there is a locale where you can melt the locals with your sunless eyes and hold your wire-haired head high while an effervescent flow of admirers bubbles from the sacred streets, winking and circling you on bikes. You have only to find your stopping place. Find it and let it remake you from the terra up. Why make amends when you can make haste? Look there, that palace, this tower, yonder mountain peak. It's the view you were born to see, the perfect finish to the shelf song of your life so far. The end. Keep looking. The end. Maybe tomorrow. The end. Almost there. The end.
Yeah, that was What the Traveler Knows from Kathleen Balma's newest book, Gallimaufry and Farrago, which are two words I had to look up. I'd never heard of them. I don't know if it's just me or those words that other people know, but they mean, I think, like sort of a pile, like bric-a-brac, like a pile of things sort of.
Right, they mean bric-a-brac, but they sound like an Italian brand name, which is why I like it.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Like, it's sort of a beautiful way to put bric-a-brac, or, you know.
So I have a thing where after I pick a title, I'll stick with it if I really love it, but then, I mean, I only have the one chapbook, so it's not like this happens to me all the time, but I chose this title and then I Googled it and I looked for it on Amazon and I found out that tons of people have used this title.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, so many people have named their poetry books Gallimaufry and Farrago. I mean, they're not very well-known people, but it's not very original title.
Well, titles can't be trademarked, and you are now the most famous Kathleen Balma to write this book. So so you're all set. I don't have to worry about that. But do you want to talk about like it is a really good title for the book. It fits with the content really well. Do you want to talk about like the process of putting the poems together for this book? Like, did you how'd that work?
Well, I'll start, if I may, I'll tell you about what I would consider my first breakthrough moment when I went from writing kind of, workshop poems that had potential but were kind of crappy, to writing things that I felt really represented me and my voice and and my brain and everything. I started out reading a lot of poets, and a lot of poets I really, really admired seemed to be writing, though I know it's not, I know you're not supposed to think that everything's autobiographical, but there are poets who seem to be writing autobiographically, and we all kind of know, even if we don't say, and it's like, and I was reading a lot of those people, and I was trying to write poems in that vein. Only I wasn't very good at those poems, and they all sounded kind of self-pitying and melodramatic, and I realized that I was in danger of becoming what I call the poor me poet. And at some point it occurred to me that I didn't have to write about myself and my life, that wasn't a requirement, and I could do other things. And I've always kind of had the imagination of a 4-year-old. I've never lost that. So I just gave myself permission to stop writing about myself. And that's when I started having a lot more fun with my writing and also writing better stuff than I had before. And that's mostly what this chapbook is filled with. Are all of a lot of poems in this chapbook come from my what if questions.
What do you mean by that, what if questions?
Well, you know how there's that period of childhood where kids are bothering you and they're saying, what if this, what if that? That's what I mean. Like, why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why is there gravity? Like, just, or what if, what do ghosts really want? If there were ghosts, why would there be their motive for ghosts? It's one of my things. What if there were invisible guns? One of my poems that I'm going to read tonight is called Revelation at the Invisible Gun Show. And I was thinking, if they invented invisible guns, then how would you sell those? Like, what would the marketing strategy be for the invisible gun? Like, I have all these weird questions that flit through my mind daily, and if I stop myself and start writing, start trying to answer my own questions as they enter my head, my own weird wacky questions about weird wacky topics, they often just turn into poems.
Yeah, the thing that I was going to say is that the book feels like you had fun with it, which is kind of, it's strange that that's a rarity within poetry books these days, but it seemed like you get to visit with Kathleen Balma having fun in her head for a little bit, which is why we read the warm-up poem I did, Building Nicole's Mama, which is an intense, dramatic poem because I try to mix it up, but these are fun poems that I really enjoyed reading. Do you want to read a couple more?
Yeah, I'll read the one I just talked about. This is Revelation at the Invisible Gun Show. I'll give you a page number for that if you're following along. It's on page 6 of the chapbook. I always wish I had props for this one because this one, it's a man showing off the invisible gun, and you have to have props for that, but I don't have them. Revelation at the Invisible Gun Show. A dapper man stands behind empty display, baby powder in hand. He sprinkles the talcum. A weapon appears to appear. It's not like any we've never seen. First sight, the almost outline of barrel and grip beneath drops of white. The salesman touches the solid nada, spreads the dust just so, and all the gun parts start to show. Now muzzle, now clip, a nude, small caliber soul. How to know if rounds are in those spirit chambers, haunting? All the bullets for this unobserved piece, to eyes untrained in unseen things, are loud in sound, if not in hue, and piercing.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite poems in the book, actually, because my dad actually owned a gun store when I was a kid. So my first job was polishing display cases on those gun shows and trying to make them shine. And
I've never been to a gun show. My gramps was a big gun enthusiast. He's the kind of guy who grew up watching and reading Westerns, and for him it was all about the fantasy of being a cowboy. He didn't really shoot guns, he just collected them, and they were like toys that, like, the way I collect, the way you collect anything, stamps but I never grew up around them. I just knew that they were an important part of my Gramps' life, and I never went to a gun show. I always wondered what they were like. So when I wanted to write this poem, I called him and said, what is a gun show like? What happens there? And he kind of described it to me. He said, well, there's some display tables and there are people selling things, and they try to, they use all the same marketing techniques as anybody else. They have these booths and these tables, and, and you can come up and ask them questions. And so it started to sound like started to sound kind of boring, and I don't know,
Mundane or something. Yeah.
almost like going to
Uh-huh.
AWP. Like,
Yeah, yeah. That's how exactly how it was. Even as a kid, I remember going there and helping set up. It was actually usually it was holsters they sold. They owned some company that sold holsters, but it felt exactly the same as going to a baseball card trade show, which I also like to do when I was like 13 or 14 or whatever that age was.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to read another poem? I kind of cut you off
Sure.
before your second.
No, not at all. Okay, so the next poem, it's called Abraham Honestly, and I have to tell you that growing up in Illinois, as you can imagine, Abraham Lincoln was like the first and main theme of every U.S. history unit that we ever had, growing up in the land of Lincoln. And on top of that, my mom was a history teacher. So one summer, she paid me to proofread her. She was teaching junior college, and she paid me to proofread her students' research papers. She was commenting on the content of the paper with one color of ink, and I was just doing basic sentence structure corrections with another color of ink. And she hated doing that kind of thing, so she pawned it off on me. And I read some of the most ludicrous sentences about Abraham Lincoln that summer that I've ever read. And one of them was so crazy that it inspired this poem. So at the beginning of this poem is a quote from an American college student's history paper, and this is the quote. With his own two hands, Abe Lincoln built the log cabin he was born in. Theory 1. Out-of-body Abe. The ghostly glob of fetal Abraham sneaks out of his mother's womb at night with architecture on his budding mind. In the first few months, the Lincoln bean can barely hold a toothpick, let alone a log, so he darts around his neighbor's place, plotting floor plans and examining crannies. By month 2, his heart's really in it. By mid-trimester, he's using the tail to smooth out the mud mortar of his neighbor's house. Mud, he thinks, and feels his very first shiver. By month 5, he's chopping thick stripes of wood by the light of his prenatal halo. By month 6, he's strapping logs to his unborn back and floating them across miles of Kentucky airspace. By month 7, he's all over the roof like a Christmas specter. By month 8, his newly lit neurons are sparkling up the lawn as he flaps back and forth from womb to hearth, nesting like there's no state like home, no place like tomorrow. Theory 2, born again Abe. When you make a house of your heart, no assembly is required, but some laying on of hands may be. Theory 3, authorial Abe. Like many Abrahams before him, Lincoln enjoys limited omniscience whenever he writes speeches, treaties, bills, or commandments, and this has begun to affect his mind in arboreal ways. He often imagines what it must have been like for his pa to construct their homestead. How many times had the teenage Lincoln built that same boxy lodge in his mind, amputating trees and sanding them to naked plainness, putting, perhaps, more care into it than his own father had. This daydream kicks in like a nervous tic when he loses things, and for every log he stacks on his imaginary abode, a windy sigh rushes through the grassy blades of his beard. Since the war began, he's been adding rooms that were never there in his youth, and the walls are getting higher. So high the house is now a tower he must climb and climb.
That was Abraham Honestly from Gallimaufry and Farrago. One of the things we mentioned, I think when we were talking earlier, is that you've had many lives already. You've had many careers and done many things. You're a librarian right now in a public library.
Yeah, and will be for the rest of my life.
Is that your final thing? As I mentioned to you when you were talking about that, we're going to do a tribute to librarians. So stick with that at least for 1 year, and then we'll get you in that issue.
I do feel it is my calling. I feel it's my right place, my right what I'm supposed to be
There's
doing. It's kind of weird to have that feeling.
Yeah. Sorry, hang on a second. Okay. I think I'm coming down with a cold, actually. But anyway, there's a meme going around that I keep seeing over the last couple of days that like more people visited the library this year than the movies, which is a good thing to hear, but it's one of those things that I don't really believe. It's one of those.
No, you should believe it. But that doesn't mean that people are reading.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Yeah. What are people doing at the library is what I want to know.
Okay. If they're under 18, they're most likely visiting the library to play video games because they don't have video game systems or they don't at home. And I would say like every day, no matter what library branch it is, there's like a small cadre of teens coming to play Roblox. Now, I used to kind of be an old fuddy-duddy about video games because the last video game I played was Space Invaders on the first Atari system. So I don't really get the whole gaming craze. And I had deep suspicions that video games were bad for people. But I did my research, and so far, all of the research keeps repeatedly showing that they're not bad for people, and in fact that they have a lot of cognitive benefits, and social benefits too. So I'm finally on the video game bandwagon, and I'm fine with it, But also a lot of people come to make photocopies, to use the computer to apply for jobs online, to make resumes, to get one-on-one tech assistance if they're not computer literate. We offer that for free, and to send faxes. We send a lot of faxes, and most of those are for people who are applying for welfare. So it's kind of shitty that they have to spend money to send a fax to get their welfare benefits, and eventually I hope that service will be free because that's literally the only reason people are sending faxes, and we send a lot.
I had no idea. But it does seem to me that the library and Starbucks are the two only social gatherings that we have left in our society. Like everybody's so isolated on their phone, or at home, and you don't really know your neighbors anymore. But the library is the one place you actually like see and interact with people.
Yeah, the library is an incredibly social space. And so I will say this as a plug for public libraries that definitely go, because there's a lot of programs, no matter who you are, that cater to you and your interests, most likely. And also, it's a great place to meet people. And we don't require that you be quiet. You can talk in the library now. That's been true for about 30 years, but just throwing that out there because a lot of people still don't know.
But we kind of sidestepped it, though. So what were your past careers before being a librarian?
Well, some of them were more controversial than others. So let's see. My first job was that I was in the Navy, and that's a whole story that would take a whole hour to tell, but I was. And I was a gunner's mate, which not very many women could boast of when I joined. It was kind of new for women to even be allowed to do that, and because it was considered a combat rating, even though if you're on a ship, you're never going to be doing hand-to-hand combat, so it was kind of silly that there were any jobs that would be closed off to women on a ship. But which eventually they figured that out, and they were like, yeah, we can let women do this because it's mostly really nerdy stuff that you do in the Navy. It's electronics and electricity and hydraulics, and it's a lot of just repair work and maintenance work of machinery, and everybody has to have basic firefighting skills, and then that's kind of it. You're just kind of a nerd supporting everybody else who are doing real combat. Sorry, shipmates. I don't mean to undermine what we do, but yeah, it's kind of true. So then I moved to Australia for love, and that's a whole another story that could fill a whole nother hour, and moved back from Australia and went to college and put myself through college by working in strip bars and paid for my college that way. And my mom knows this, so I feel okay saying it to everybody else. Like the hardest thing is when your mom learns that about you. Now that she knows, I'm not really embarrassed for anybody else to know. So we've been through that whole thing. And then when I went to grad school, I was a teaching assistant, that a lot of people watching this will probably be able to relate to. And then I was a Spanish teacher for a long time in public schools, and I'm not good at that. I'm good at Spanish, but I'm not good at teaching it because I don't have patience for people who don't just learn it easily like I did. So that wasn't a good idea for me to do. Because I had a library science degree, I was a school librarian. And then when I transitioned to working in public library, it was like coming home. It was exactly what I knew I should have been doing all along.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Before we went on air, we were talking a little bit about just the idea that writers shouldn't be just writers and should have some kind of background and some kind of story, which is really good. Good to hear your perspective on that, because that's what Rattle's really all about and what it was founded for. For anybody who doesn't know at home, Alan Fox, who founded Rattle 25 years ago, is a lawyer, and then he ended up in real estate sort of by accident. Then he ended up being a businessman, and a counselor degree and all sorts of different kind of things, and sort of trickled into poetry, which was something that he loved when he was younger. And for Rattle, it's something that we really believe strongly, that poetry enriches your life, and so it should be something that everyone should be doing rather than just people who are academics in an English department. Do you think just reading poems, do you think, in books and things, do you sort of feel a sense of, that a poet is just an English major and doesn't have any life experience? Is that something you kind of recognize?
Well, sometimes. I think, I don't think that's necessarily true now. Certainly I do wonder what is the percentage of people who are writing poetry who are strictly academics and have been academics their whole adult lives. I don't, and there's no shame in that at all. And I don't want to belittle it. It's, for some people that is a calling, and I understand, wanting to spend your life in academia. When I was in academia, I was very happy there. I don't think I would be happy there now. I'm not sure really why. I'm just in a different place now than when I was in grad school. It no longer feels like home. Don't know. But one thing I like about writers is that often we do have kind of a weird life path that doesn't lead directly from point A to point B. And so we have interesting stories to tell. And those of us who haven't I consider my weird life path mostly a result of bad choices. So for those people who have not made bad choices their whole lives, and who've been good and who've been studious and diligent and also have followed an academic path, they usually impress and intimidate the hell out of me because they're so knowledgeable and so articulate. And I ideally like to think that all of us inform each other and help each other. But yeah, I guess I do have a bias in favor of those of us who aren't just living in academia. If I lean one way, obviously that's the way I went, so I lean that way. I think you have a richer. Rather, I think that the relationship I have to literature is an ideal one because, like I was telling you before we went on air, I don't think that I would really love literature the way I do if I did it all day for a living. If I had to read and write and edit and proofread and critique for a living, if that was my bread and butter, I would need a break from it. And instead, I do something else that I love, and then I come home, and literature is my, it's my thing that I look forward to at the end of the day. And I think that's such a more healthy relationship to the arts, that it gets to be my vacation instead of my living.
Yeah, that's how I've always felt about it too. The reason why I got into this, I was a science major, and writing poetry was like a break from doing lab work and all this sort of tiring
That's so cool.
things that you had to do. And so I eventually, would sort of I started faking my labs just to keep writing, which, because it was just, it's just academic stuff. Like, who cares? And so I'd write fake data, which, we all.
That's me. I can't.
Yeah, well, that was me back as an undergraduate. But I didn't get a degree. I didn't do my thesis, so I don't have a degree. So I'm not a cheater because I just was along for the ride. But I think what happens a lot, there's a career path, which I even thought, when I dropped out of the sciences, I was like dual majoring in English. So I thought, well, I'll just major in English. And I thought like there's sort of a myth that there's a path for, you get an MFA and then you get it's a terminal degree. So you can teach at college and then you teach and there's like an actual path. But the truth of it is that there's so much competition and so few jobs that really what happens is people end up dropping out and finding other career paths.
Is it more or less dismal than the humanities?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. There's one thing where like analyzing, like being able to do literary style analysis and thinking in that way is really helpful for a lot of different careers. And there's things you can do with it, but to become we did the adjunct poets issue. And what really happens is you imagine that you're going to become a professor, and then you end up becoming an adjunct. And then there's a way that it's a pyramid scheme, which is what really bothers me. It's multi-level marketing. And, the people at the bottom are paying for the one, couple people at the top. And that always...
I always thought it was shitty from a student's perspective. As somebody who actually paid my way through most of my undergraduate education, that I was paying the same amount of money to take a class with somebody who had never taught before and didn't have a master's degree as I would pay to take a class with somebody who had a PhD and was renowned in their field, and of course we've all had great TAs and bad professors or vice versa. And it comes down to some people can teach and some can't, but it's never fair. It's never fair for the person who's paying, and it's never fair for the person who's being paid. It's never, there's always something that doesn't work out. And I can't figure out why education keeps getting more expensive when people are increasingly paid less and exploited more too. That also doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. A lot of market forces at play, unfortunately, which is really, I don't know. It's a problem. But I was trying to segue into something I wanted to ask you about, because you have two bios in this book, which is, you have one internally and one on the back cover. And in your one internally, you say, Kathleen Balma is the least likely person to have ever been a Fulbright fellow. So I really want to ask about that. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, it's a former stripper. The whole time. Okay, so I went to Spain on the Fulbright, and it was my second time in Spain because I'd done study abroad there. And so I was so happy to be back. And the whole time I was there, I kind of had this guilty tee-hee, voice in the back of my head, like, they gave a Fulbright to a stripper. Oh my God. And they don't know it. They think I'm somebody really special and important. And the whole time you're there on Fulbright, and it's a great compliment to be given the Fulbright, but I felt like I was a fraud the whole time. Like I had tricked them into thinking that that I deserved this. And the whole time you're there, you get treated like royalty by all of the embassy people who, as it turns out, are all envious because they all applied for Fulbrights and didn't get it, so they joined the Foreign Service instead. And that was a repeated story that I heard from people in the Foreign Service was, I always wanted a Fulbright, but I couldn't get one, so here I am. I was like, and they wanted, and there was a moment when they'd invited us to the embassy for like wine and cheese and mingling with important Spanish people. And I was so intimidated to talk to all of these people. And at some point a light bulb went off and I realized, oh my God, these people are intimidated to talk to me. They think I'm the important person. And that just struck me as so hilarious. That's kind of what inspired the bio.
So I don't really know that much about the Fulbright system. There was some kind of like thesis or like you had to like present some kind of project you wanted to do, right? Is that true?
There are many different types of Fulbrights, and I was there they're the Fulbright researchers, and that grant, people think that one's harder to get. In a way it is, because you do have to have sponsorship from somebody in the country that you're applying to go to. There has to somebody important in your field has to write a letter and say, we want this person to come here and we will support them while they're here on their project. And it's hard. I feel like people are scared that they'll never be able, oh, here comes Milo the kitty. Okay. Hi, Milo.
Yeah, we were told Milo would make a cameo, so I'm glad it came through.
Yeah, here he is. So I think people see that requirement and they're like, oh, I'm never going to be able to get anybody important in my field to recommend me. But as it turns out, people are so afraid of that one that there are fewer applications, and so it's less competitive. And the one I was there for is the teaching assistantship, which everybody applies to because they think it'll be easier to get. And so as a consequence, it turns out to be much harder to get because you're competing against 10 times more people than you would have been. So that's the one that I got. And it meant that I was placed in a bilingual elementary school, and I was teaching English part-time. In reality, I was having really sweet conversations with 8-year-olds about what they had for breakfast. And things like that for about 16 hours a week. And the rest of the time I was free. And I think it was one of the best years of my life. I tried to make the most of it in every way and to earn it because I felt like I hadn't earned it. I had this imposter syndrome thing going on. So I worked extra hard for the school and did a lot of extra projects for them that I didn't have to do because I wanted to prove to myself that I really deserved to be there. And it was a wonderful thing. It was a great experience.
That's really cool to hear. I want to follow up on the imposter syndrome because I think we all have it, but I think it's just the case. Yeah. Like I feel like an imposter. Like what the hell am I doing? I'm just like, I don't know anything about poetry, and here I am editing a poetry magazine and doing poetry shows. But let's just drop it and leave it at that because we haven't done really 2 poems in a row without me interrupting you. So why don't you read 2 poems so people can enjoy some of your poetry?
Okay. Well, the next one that I'll read. Okay, I'll read 2 in a row. I'll read 2 from the chapbook. What Do Ghosts Need? Which is on page. Let's see. It's on page 25 and 26. And then Singularity, which is on pages 30 and 31. Okay. Can you hear the cat going nuts on the cord? I'm afraid he's going to unplug while I'm reading. I'll try to make sure that doesn't happen. What do ghosts need? A ghost needs an audience, or it is pointless. But does a ghost need a point? No. Never mind then. Closure, clearly, is a ghostly need. A ghost needs a therapist. Yes, but not a couch where they rest floating. A ghost needs a locus to which it can be tethered by an airy umbilical, but who or what is at the other end, refusing the quick snip? A ghost must need an otherworldly obstetrician or midwife. Is the psychic medium a spirit's shrink or accouchess? Neither. She's the doula. The ghost needs a doula? Alrighty then. Better a ghoul's doula than a Hallow's evil wet nurse. That's poltergeist stuff. Some ghosts seem to need chains. Some people also seem to need them. Ghosts were once people, this makes sense. The chain might replace the tether in some cases, depending on whether the role of haint is self-imposed. To cast yourself in a shade monologue and saturate a place with your own inner suds is a far banshee cry from being sentenced to limp around in a heap of invisible bling, a la Sid Vicious, neck padlocked, keyless. Sid Vicious is definitely a ghost. He was a ghost when alive, and a very bad one. He had no talent for it. He was all circumstance and no pomp, but he pulled it off. Probably lesser ghosts hated him. Ghosts are player haters. They need to step back, be less aura, more trace. A ghost needs Gandhi, 12 steps, or a massage of the gossamer pressure point that leads from the power left foot to the I don't give a damn center of the brain. Ghost brains all have reverse Alzheimer's. They can't forget, can't feign, can't faint at the sight of real or ethereal blood, can't pass out, can't nap through the boring bits, can't shake it off, can't make light, can't take a joke, can only emote. My God, you ghosts, get a grip. What you need and can't get is Mick Jagger singing Satisfaction until you bleed blue luminescence from the sheer grist of it. What you need is validation, dear ghosts. What you need is a celestial telegram from your mama. Stop. A ghost is an SOS. A ghost needs Morse code, but goes with the bat signal. A ghost in binary code needs 10. I will say, in preface to the next one, Singularity, that what inspired me to write this one was that I was TAing a World Lit class, and the professor made the decision to make us teach excerpts of all the sacred texts. And I felt grossly underqualified for that. But one of the texts that we had to read and analyze from a literary perspective was the Book of Job. So I got to know that book really well and inspired this poem. Singularity. Job was a good man, not a wise one. So says Maimonides, Spanish Jew and philosopher. Job was a pussy. So say the Marines. Hooah! Job was a covert narcissist who saw his first wife and children as interchangeable with the new set and really only wanted to be admired. So says pop psychology. Job was a loyal subject. So says God, an overt narcissist. Like father, like son. Or should we say, the apple doesn't fall far. Har, har. Job was so accustomed to a life of privilege that when the biblical shit hit the satanic fan, he asked, why me? Instead of questioning his luck when times were easy. Job was a long sufferer, but not for life. So said every one of his slaves. Job was a bit of a drama queen. So says a Greek chorus of drag queens. Who would know? Sachet. Job was lucky to be a son of Jehovah instead of a daughter of Troy. So say Cassandra and Briseus. Job was a snooze fest. So say my students. Job was a cooperative learner who did wonderfully in math and music this year, numbers, psalms, but didn't reach his potential in science and is too often on cloud 9. So said his 3rd grade teacher. Job was a farmer, outstanding in his field. So said Job's obituary. Job was neither good nor evil, but a complex amalgam of positive and negative personality traits that emerged or not, depending on circumstances. So say the social sciences. Job was his DNA. Even his mullet was predetermined. So say the Minnesota Twin Studies. Job was a good provider, but not a good lover, and he never took me to Paris, though I begged. So said both of his wives. Job was never an eye for an eye kind of guy. So say the theologians. Job was better than his author, better too than this one. So say I.
And those were 2 poems from Gallimaufry and Farrago by Kathleen Balma. So David Cook says, wow, that was fun. And those are good examples of kind of what you do with poetry. You just sort of start with a premise and then have fun with it, which is why it's a really enjoyable book. There's some really good questions here, so let me pass on a couple of these. So you mentioned moving around a lot and living in different places. And Kashiana Singh asks, what have you imbibed from places you moved into? Your poems? And then David Cook has a follow-up to that. In the same vein as Kashiana's question, on the Isle of Man, They have a map of poems inspired by locations on the aisle. What places and what poems would you put on your map?
Okay. Okay. Well,
to simplify it,
the relationship of place to poetry it's a really big question, and it's an interesting question. And one thing that I wish that I'd done more of is to sit down and to write about, like, just directly, explicitly about some of the wonderful places that I've lived and some of the horrible places that I've lived. And I am trying to do more of that now, and it's slow going. What does happen is that things will just seep in, So in this chapbook, there are quite a few poems that I think make it obvious that I've spent a lot of time in the Mediterranean. I've also spent a lot of time in Italy because I was married to someone who grew up there, and we went to Florence at least every 3 years for a big chunk of time to spend with his family, and that place is a part of me now. I know a little Italian. I didn't want to ruin my Spanish, so I didn't go too far with that. But I think that you'll see glimpses of Italy and Spain in my poems. You'll definitely see a lot of the Midwest. There are a lot of poems that touch on what I would consider Midwestern themes. Abraham Lincoln. There's one called Genetically Modified Crop Conspiracies, and one about tornadoes called The Causes of Cyclone Formation Aren't Well Understood. There's a lot of... I'm not saying I'm trying to make the Midwest cool, because that would be impossible. But, I would like to redeem it a little bit from its profoundly uncool status. And also because it's me, it's home, it's the place that made me that keeps coming up over and over again, but sort of the places I've chosen to live. One place that isn't coming up a lot that I've kind of been consciously avoiding writing about is Australia, because of my experiences there that I haven't been ready to write about yet. And I'm trying to do that now, but I don't have any Australia poems yet. So that would be a map
what do you mean
for me.
What kind of experiences, or is it something you don't want to talk about?
I mean, I don't think I'm ready to talk about it yet. Yeah, I think that will eventually come into my work, but I moved there for a relationship. It's the only place that I ever moved that I didn't choose to move there. The only place, I should say the only international location that I moved that I didn't choose to move there, that I moved there because that's where the person that I wanted to be with at the time lived. And that was the only way, because I was in the American Navy when I met him, and he was in the Australian Navy, and we had trained together. And he was a career sailor. I wasn't. So the only way that was going to work was if I moved there. And we gave it a go. And I'm just going to say, the person I am now, I could probably really dig living in Australia, but you have to have a thick skin to live there. That's a place where they rib you constantly. And I was very, very sensitive. I would even say overly sensitive girl when I lived there, and I could not take a joke, and I could definitely not take, it was a culture that I didn't feel that I fit in. I felt in every way that I didn't fit. And I kept trying to find my niche and find my people, and kept not finding them, and felt just very lonely the whole year. So, also bad things happened to me there, and I made bad choices, as I often did. And so there's a whole thing. But I have no Australia poems yet. Look for that.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a book coming up for sure. Let's do one more question from the audience here, and then and we'll finish up maybe with 2 poems. Let's see. Okay. So another from David Cook, but he says, are there particular pet peeves you find in poems you read, you write, or even your readers point out, namely Rodney Jones, which I have no idea what that means.
What?
He does his research. He's our number one viewer. He's prepared.
Pet peeves of mine, like things that I don't like to see in poetry, or things that people don't like to see
your
in my
pet
poetry.
peeves. So that you find in poems you read, you write, or even your readers point out.
I don't know that I have readers. First of all, like if I have them, please show yourselves. I I don't know about that one, but I guess my pet peeves. Well, when I was in grad school, there were words that I didn't like to see because there were words that were coming up a lot in everybody's poems that seemed kind of random, but it was like I got really tired of Formica, hyacinth, and wisteria. It's just words because people just wanted to put them in poems just to put them in poems. So that's probably the only pet peeve that I have is if I see a word that seems to have come into style and everybody's sort of flourishing it, you know. I guess the other thing is this is the bitchiest thing I'm going to say. I don't like to be bored when I'm reading. You know, like, please don't bore me. I'm cool with the fact that not all poetry has to be accessible to everybody, and that, you know, and that some people just are more brainiacs than I am, and they naturally write at a higher level than I do, and maybe, and that's cool, that's fine, but there's a lot of boring shit that I read that you don't have to be a brainiac to read. You know, like, it's not that it's not accessible. It's just that there's not much going on. I don't know how to say this. I find that when I read, I think I'm a fairly open-minded reader. And I also, if I'm having trouble with a poem, I usually assume the fault is mine. I don't blame the poem. I blame myself. And I want to know what I can do to be a better reader so that I can access that poem and feel and really connect with it. But I also am at a point in my life when I've gained some confidence about my reading abilities, and that I didn't always have. And I feel that that fiction writers do something that poets don't do. It's something that fiction writers talk about a lot more, and that's just wanting to have something at stake in the story and in the work, so that people will actually have a reason to keep reading. And I feel like poets, we don't talk about that enough, that there needs to be something at stake in the poem for people to want to keep reading. That it's not all about us. It's also think about the poor reader who's maybe reading along, waiting for it to get better, and it's not getting better,
Yeah. Well, I totally relate to that. Like, there's sort of two things I do when I'm reading submissions, which is, first, I listen for music, which is really easy to hear. Like, you can hear if people have the music of speech going on in their poem. Like, if it's a real voice, it's talking to you. That's like cutoff number one. And then I just wait to get bored. And if I make it through the whole poem without getting bored, then that's one that I need to show everybody else, and maybe we'll publish it. Like, that's how simple it is, but that's what the editing process is. So, and I think you hit on something very, very true there.
So wait, what I don't understand about that question was are you asking me what are Rodney Jones?
I don't know what Rodney Jones has to do.
What was that part of the question?
I don't know if Rodney Jones, but do you have an opinion about Rodney Jones or some kind of interaction?
Yeah, he's in the back room right now.
Is it?
You want to hear his opinion, or do you want to hear his pet peeve? We read each other's work probably, first. We are each other's first readers.
Oh, see, I had no idea.
So we're brutally honest with each other. If I write something that's complete shit, he'll just tell me, and he never writes anything that's complete shit, or if he does, he doesn't show it to me. But I'm pretty brutal with him too when something's not working for me. So, but I have no idea what his pet peeves for my work are.
That's an interesting question.
But he's watching right now, so if he wants to come in and comment at any point, he can. And I don't have any pet peeves for his work either. But when you read somebody's work a lot, when you have that kind of relationship where you're reading somebody's work a lot, it's and commenting on it, you do get to know each other's tics, each other's literary tics and favorite moves. What I like about our editorial relationship is that we will call each other on, you make this move a lot and you're making it again here. Maybe you want to try something new. And that's not a bad thing. Like, he pointed out that in my chapbook, I used certain words over and over again that I didn't realize I was using over and over again. And that was useful. Or certain rhetorical devices. Yeah.
I think it does.
Does that
Yeah.
help?
Yeah. So we're kind of run up on time. Do you want to finish out with maybe like 2 shorter poems or 1 longer poem?
I have 2 shorter poems that are not in the chapbook that I will read. They're both autobiographical, which is a new thing for me to do. I haven't done autobiographical work for 15 years, so now I'm doing that. And they're both about when I was a stripper. Yay, stripper poems! Everybody loves the stripper poems, so I'm probably going to keep writing them.
Well, they're really interesting because I've never been a stripper, so I have no idea what that is like. So I don't know if you're.
People have. So the first one is on Missouri Review Poem of the Week, and it was one of the weeks in November, and it's called Jaybirds. If someone is denuded, shouldn't that mean they are clad? This word is a wrong locution, a shame to itself. It should stand for an act of dressing, a stripping away of nudity. Misleading, too, in Spanish. Desnuda could do as Italian does. Just take that prefix right off. I clothed myself in public after a striptease once. I stood in an unlit spot far from the stage where all eyes should have gazed because Raven was there, nuding herself. I costumed in slow motion, partly for the luxury. Garments cinched, I looked for Ahmed and Fuad. They were playing pool in overalls. I crossed the room. Along the way, a man stretched out his arm, gave me $1. This is going to sound strange, he said, but the sexiest thing I've seen is you getting dressed. If you're offended on my behalf, de-offend thyself. $1 is as much as some can give, and my business was to inspire such comments. Odd but honest work. The naked get paid, the clothed leave broke, and none lose face until someone outside this place exposes us. Milo's coming back for the last poem, I think. Milo, are you coming? Coming or going? All right, he's not coming. The last one is called Nude Bar, and it was I only enter the contests that pay you a lot because, like, contests are expensive. And this was a finalist in the, it's got a really long name. It's in Australia. I really wanted to win because it was in Australia. And I was like, yes, I'll go back to Australia and collect my prize. It'll be wonderful. But I didn't win. It's the University of Canberra Vice-Chancellor's International Poetry Prize. That's long. Anthology. And
I should just cut you off and say
ahead.
that the another stripper poem is Punchline, which is a finalist for the Rattle Poetry Prize. So if you're watching this and you're a subscriber, I'm not going to campaign to vote, but Kathleen might. So voting is open till February 1st for subscribers. Yeah, vote your conscience.
Vote your
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, last poem of the night, folks. Nude Bar. I wanted to write about the dressing room, how if I ever had a harbor, that was it. Those rooms with those women, and how stupid excited I was, like all the other tourists, when I paid the extra fee to view the harem of Topkapi, only to find the drabbest part of the palace complex. Flat white wall, bare stone floor. Why didn't I expect that? I, who had known such places and knew better. Like everyone else, I was lured by the fantasy question. What went on in there? Here's what goes on backstage. A lot of naked women? Sure. But they're not training for fellatio on bananas or rubbing each other with lavender oil. They're bickering over who gets to sit in what chair. They're not spreading their legs on a bearskin rug in front of a lit fireplace. They're spreading the word about who's tipping tonight and who never tips. They're complaining about the new girl, occasionally passing a joint. They're doing homework, possibly for your class. There's very little fighting, but sometimes big talk of fighting. There is no decor, just some old carpet and a bathroom big enough for 1.5 people to shower and shit. What did you imagine? What did you come here for?
Well, Kathleen Balma, thanks so much for joining us on the Rattlecast. Let me pass on one last comment. Gordon Capola says, I love that your work always features compelling stakes. The experiences you create to share with us matter. And I totally agree, too. I sort of emphasize the fun of your poems because...
That's totally sweet of him, but I'd have to say that Gordon is my friend. So.
but it's true, though. Your poems are about things that matter, too, in addition to being really fun, which is the more unusual thing for poetry. But both are really appreciated, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Kathleen Balma. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.
All right.
Yeah, so that was Kathleen Balma. Hope everybody enjoyed that. And once again, let me show you off her book. This is Gallimaufry and Farrago by Kathleen Balma. It is from Finishing Line Press. You can find them at finishinglinepress.com, spelled just like it sounds. And it is, $14.95 from Finishing Line Press. It's a really, really lovely chapbook. So thanks so much to Kathleen Balma for sharing that with us and joining us today. I hope you enjoyed that. Now, we're doing something a little different with the open mic. And from now on, we're going to be doing a prompt. And last week, we used a prompt from, let me find this book. Our prompt was from More Challenges for the Delusional, Peter Murphy's prompts and the writing they inspired. This is a book from Diode Editions. And we did a prompt last week, but we're going to end every show from now on with a prompt that Megan's going to write. She had a lot of fun writing a whole bunch of prompts, and she's going to keep doing that. And so let me find, to get a little organized first, but somewhere in these stacks of papers, I have the prompt for next week. Let me see. Okay, so let's start out just by sharing the prompt for next week. And then we'll do some open lines. We'll share. I'm going to write a poem. Megan's going to write a poem. If you would like to write a poem for the prompt of the week, we have a bit of a new system. I don't want to use Submittable because it feels too formal. And you have to sign up for the Submittable system in order to do that. So I'm just going to do it over email from now on. Whether open mic poems where you want to send an audio file, or prompt poems for the week if you want to just send a poem and I'll read them and show them on screen. But all you have to do is send an email to openmic@rattle.com. And so do that by Monday every week, and I'll be sure to feature at least a few of the poems. I can't do every poem that's sent in, but I can do some of them. And I'll write a poem every week, and Megan's going to write a poem every week, and sort of we'll get together and write poems together, which, I really do believe that poetry is something that enriches life and that we should all be participating in it. And I kind of feel like, like I'm not practicing what I'm preaching because I haven't been writing at all. So I'm going to write a poem every week, and then that way I'll have a poem every week, and I'll be doing it too, and that'll be good. So the prompt for next week is here. This is Megan's writing prompt of the week, and this is the nightmarish fangtooth among the deepest living fish ever discovered. Write a poem about that, and but you must avoid the words fish, sea, and ocean. So write about the fang-toothed fish, which is that, creepy ass fish that lives way like 1,000 leagues under the sea, but don't use the word fish, sea, or ocean. And that's what we're doing for next week. So if you do write a poem, like I said, just send it to openmic@rattle.com over email. If you want to include an audio of yourself reading it, I'll play that. If you want to just send the poem, I'll read some of the poems myself and show them on screen so we can all sort of participate. Now, last week, I have to dig this out too. I should have bookmarked this page. Well, I'm not going to find it. But the prompt was write a poem, a postcard poem, so it has to be short. It was from an inanimate object to you, offering some advice, either good advice or bad advice. And include a lie and something that's true. And this book, More Challenges for the Delusional, has like a prompt, and then it has extra challenges. So the extra challenge was to use a title from a movie or a famous or a capital city of another country. So that was the prompt for last week. And Megan wrote a poem. I wrote a poem. And we also have a poem from Kim Tedrow, who's here watching live on the chat. I see her already. So let's do those 3 poems really quick. They're short because they're postcard poems, which makes it pretty quick this week. But in future weeks, there'll probably be longer poems. The prompt for this week is shorter. So this is my poem. This is Postcard from the Lighthouse. And now I have to give you the backstory a little bit, which is always, I don't know, some poems have backstories. So the last movie I watched was The Lighthouse, which I thought was great. I don't know if anybody else watching this live right now saw that movie, but I felt like, that it was sort of like going to a museum, like an art gallery, and every scene was like the photo from an art gallery. And somebody mentioned in the comment last week it was not an inanimate object; it was a persona. So you could do anything you wanted, any other persona talking to you. Yeah, sorry about that. So the last movie I watched was The Lighthouse. So I wanted to be delusional, and so I included the movie title. And I was just thinking about lighthouses. And when I was a kid, growing up in Western New York, we had a lighthouse in our town. And I'll show you. Let me show you a picture here. This is the Charlotte Lighthouse at the mouth of the Genesee River on Rochester, New York. And a friend of my mother's was actually the lighthouse keeper. And so we got to tour the lighthouse. It was a little museum. And they've since restored it, too, where they've replaced since I was a kid, they replaced the beacon at the top, and they whitewashed and reconstructed the brick. So it's sort of back to its early 1800s state right now. And it's a museum. But the interesting thing about the lighthouse to me always was that it wasn't functional anymore because it was built in the early 1800s. And around 50 years later, I think it was, the city of Rochester built a pier, which pushed the mouth of the river, the Genesee River, out, I don't know, a couple miles upstream. So it ended up being, after like 1970 something, it ended up being irrelevant. And it was just abandoned and nobody used it. And then around the, 1950s or something, high school students in Charlotte, New York, petitioned to not have it demolished, but instead turn it into some kind of museum or historical site. And now it's a museum. So this is my advice from a lighthouse. Postcard from the Lighthouse, Charlotte, New York. Stand for something strong as stone, and bellow out its monotone. Be the heart of the museum, the tallest part. It doesn't matter what they think. We turn and turn, not wink or blink. So that was my poem for the prompt. I don't know, it's the first poem I've written in like 6 months or so. So there you go, a little diameter postcard-sized poem. And here was Megan's poem. She wrote one too today. I wrote that last night. I like to write very late at night myself. Here's Megan's poem. This is Hey Slob. Hey Slob, through a slat in the blinds you keep airtight. Why? Because you eat pudding in bed at night? I can see the neighbor's dog. His fur has a tide in the wind, a little brown lake. You can't hide from an inch of blue sky. Is it January or June? Is every dusty light bulb a little moon? Lock your door. Don't worry about me. Put on that white noise that sounds like the sea. Love, yesterday's coffee cup. I have to say, Megan does like to leave her old coffee cups around the house. Sorry for saying that, Megan, but it's totally true. I've always taken her coffee cups back to the kitchen. Let's see. And then here's a poem by Kim Tedrow. And Kim asked where to send this, and I told her through open mic at rattle.com. So Kim sent this way. If you have a poem right now, I have the email open, and if you send your poem, if you happen to write a poem based on last week's prompt, I have my email open. I can put it up right now if you'd like, so send it over to openmic@rattle.com. But Kim Tedrow already did, and here's Kim Tedrow's poem. This is, You Asked Me What It's Like Being Dead. We never had Paris. Hell, we didn't even make it to Omaha. I left you because I wanted you to further your education. But when your time comes, take the lost highway to where it ends, and you'll be here with me. There are no bugs, and because we don't have our bodies, no shit either. Aside from that, it's not that much different than being alive. So that was Kim Tedrow's postcard poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Kim. That you noticed the movie reference Lost Highway. And that's right, I love that part too. The Lost Highway to where it ends, and you'll be here with me. Because, I don't know, that's the highlight of the poem for me. So thanks so much for sharing that, Kim. Okay, we have 2 more open mic poems. And as always, let me just put this up really quick because I never remember the phone number. But you can either, if you'd like to join on the open mic, send me a chat message over Skype to Rattle Poetry, all one word. I'll reply, and then I'll call you back when the time is right. Or you can call by phone, 818-850-7727. That's 818-850-7727. We have 2 pre-recorded poems to share today. But if you'd like to join in the open mic, please do. Either way, it's a lot of fun, so don't hesitate. Let's see what we have here. So, has anybody... Joy Coulter would like to read a poem. So Joy, we'll get to you after we do one of the pre-recorded poems, but Joy Coulter's here from Rock Hill, South Carolina. So I will do this one poem by Kashiana Singh first. Kashiana's here on the chat. I saw her. Thanks so much for joining in live. Love everybody who joins in live. Let's see. So here, Kashiana's, this is her self-obituary, as featured in a photojournalistic style blog about New Delhi and its residents. As her ex-home, Kashiana's obituary also is featured in the 239th death on the Delhiwala blog news website. So you can go to New Yorker, just type in New Yorker and type in Delhiwala's visions. And also you can go to thedelhiwala.com and you can search for Kashiana Singh there and find this too. This is Carpe Diem. I think Kashiana has done an open mic poem before. She's from Vernon Hills, Illinois. And here she is reading Carpe Diem.
Hello, this is Deborah L. Davitt from Houston, Texas.
That's the wrong poem. Hang on, this is Kashiana.
I would, if I could. I would, if I could. If I could plant myself on my Dada's knees again, I would listen. Wrapped as he fed me almonds, I would feel his fingers where the knuckles knotted stories. I would feel his fingers where the knuckles knotted stories. If I could borrow my Nani's lace dupatta again,
If I could borrow my Nani's lace dupatta again, I would wear it like a pilgrimage. I would wear it like a pilgrimage. I would celebrate her indiscernible life, hewed into its layers. If I could hold my brother close to my chest, if I could hold my brother close to my chest, I would hold gently, and folding my arms around his neck, I would not let go. I would not let go, embracing ferociously till my breath became an extension of his. Till my breath became an extension of his. If I could place my daughter into the warmth of my being, if I could place my daughter into the warmth of my womb, I would tell her to sink her pain into the innards of my being. I would tell her to sink her pain into the innards of my being. I would drizzle into myself. I would drizzle into myself, into her bones, every speckle of sunshine. If I could do nothing when my son pottered around the kitchen, if I could do nothing when my son pottered around the kitchen, I would let the dishes sit longer. I would let the dishes sit longer and listen to his voice breaking. And listen to his voice breaking. I would linger around and watch him becoming a composition. If I could bring a bouquet of time to my parents, if I could bring a bouquet of time to my parents, I would choose the largest one in the universe. I would choose the largest one in the universe, and I would infuse the petals with an aroma of whispering thanks. I would infuse the petals with an aroma of whispering thanks. If I could sleep each past night, if I could sleep each past night again on a pillow beside you, I would relearn the forms and shapes of your desires. I would relearn the forms and shapes of your desires. I would arrange my head into your arms, unwilling to awake. If I could harness moments, collect sounds, collapse days, I would swallow them into my gurgling veins. I would swallow them into my gurgling veins as the waves wash my bodily offerings into an anticipating ocean. I would, if I could.
So that was Kashiana Singh from Vernon Hills, Illinois. Thanks so much for sharing that poem, Carpe Diem. If I could plant myself on my Dada's knee again, I would listen, rapt as he fed me almonds. Great poem. Thanks so much for sharing, Kashiana. Let me call up Joy Coulter now. And if I'm going to call you, please do remember to turn off your Skype. I mean, not your Skype. You got to leave your Skype on. Turn off your YouTube, because there's a delay of about 30 seconds. So it gets confusing unless you remember to turn off your YouTube, shut out that window. But Joy Coulter, I have you. I see you. Hang on, let me pull you into the stream. Just one second. And we have you. Joy, how you doing? From South Carolina, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks so much for calling in again. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely my pleasure. So what do you have for us tonight?
This is not, of course, one of your prompt poems, as I mentioned. The name of this poem is Bet He'd Crock Her.
Bet He'd Crock Her. Is it published anywhere?
No,
okay,
sir.
Thank you.
Just go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I should have known, despite your sly dog stares and flirty smile, you were just reading me a cookbook recipe on page 15. Requires 2 fat sticks of buttering up to grease the grin and coat each floured word. Then call her sweetie. Egg her on by adding sugar. But you'll need to get a rise out of her. This will mix her up into an easy lump of dough for you to handle over time, allowing you to extract desired information from her. The name and number of the honey bun beside her. Thank you.
Well, very nice. Yeah, thanks so much for calling in again, Joy, it's great to see you. Yeah, hope you call in again soon. Thanks for sharing that poem.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
have a good night.
You
Bye.
too. Bye-bye.
And that was Joy Coulter from, where did she say? In South Carolina. Rock Hill, South Carolina. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Joy. I love the people who call in over Skype. That's my favorite. That's the preferred. If you can do it and you can manage, it's a good technology to learn because it's really easy and it's beneficial in a lot of ways. So hope more people can call in over Skype. But thanks to Joy Coulter for doing that just now. We have one more pre-recorded open mic, and here is a poem. Let's see if I can get this on screen. Michael T. Young sent a poem just now, which is from the prompt this week, which, as I said, I'm sorry for saying it was an inanimate object. I was trying to remember what it was, but it was a persona, so any persona. Didn't have to be an inanimate object. Any persona would do. And this was from George Krasinski, who I don't know. So let's see. This is a persona poem from George Krasinski by Michael T. Young, who, let me just show this really quick. He is next week's poet, Michael T. Young, The Infinite Doctrine of Water. This is a book that we'll be talking about next week. I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it. And here's Michael T. Young's poem from the prompt. This is, if I can, let's see, if I can make it so you can see it. Gotta scale it right for you. Okay. So here's his postcard poem. He says it may be a little longish, but I wrote it on as a block to fill a square. So here it is. Dear Michael, here in Budapest, the words of Radnati still ring when the church bells strike the morning fresh, a kind of numinous fight club. It leaves me aching for a life on the edge of things, a taste of blood in my mouth. Radnati in the ditch with those last poems in his breast pocket. How much more alive we are with a gun to our head. You should come here, my friend, for you're marching to your death there in the circuit of your rush hours and coffee breaks. It might even cure that limp of yours. It's staggering, the echo of these bells humming through my bones like a tuning fork. I might even be persuaded to call those hawfinches in the park angels. Your friend, George Krasinski. Yeah, so that was Michael T. Young, who is next week's poet. And I'm not sure who George Krasinski is. I'll have to look that up after. But beautiful lines and a good music in that poetry. Thanks so much for sharing that, Michael. I'm really looking forward to reading your book and talking to you next week. And he just sent that, 6 minutes ago. So, if you'd like to send a poem, if you wrote a postcard poem and you'd want me to read it and share it with everybody on the Rattlecast here, the open lines, please do just email me at openmic@rattle.com or give me a call at, what is the number again? The number is 818-850-7727. You can also send a chat message to me at Rattle Poetry over Skype, and I will call you back when I have a moment. If you do that, has anybody else sent me a chat message? Not yet. So, but if you'd like to do that, please do. We have one more open mic poem, and I played it for a second by accident. This is Deborah L. Davitt from Houston, Texas. Let me read her bio for you really quick. This is Deborah L. Davitt. Was raised in Nevada, but currently lives in Houston, Texas, with her husband and son. Her poetry has received Riesling, Dwarf Star, and Pushcart nominations. Her short fictions appear in Intergalactic Medicine Show, Galaxy's Edge, and Pseudopod. See, I like reading these because I don't know what's going on out there. So I sort of learn where people are publishing. I've never heard of any of those. There's so much cool stuff, but I'm really out of the loop. So I love hearing those things. Anyway, for more about her work, including her Edda Earth novels and her poetry collection, The Gates of Never, check out www.eddaearth, that's EDDA-earth.com. But here's her poem, Enceladus. Is that a planet or a moon? A moon of Jupiter, maybe? Maybe we'll find out in a second. These are open lines, so I have no idea what these poems are. I didn't read them. I just made sure the audio was okay. So here we go. This is Enceladus? I think you say Enceladus. Let's see. I think that's a moon of Jupiter, I think. Maybe Saturn. Maybe we'll find out in just a second. Here we go. This is Deborah L. Davitt.
Hello, this is Deborah L. Davitt from Houston, Texas. I will be reading my poem Enceladus, which was first published at Palu Texney, a magazine of many arts, in December of 2018. Enceladus. Against the face of night, a white moon hoves into view, a hostage, bound and fevered by a titan's gravitic caress. Responding to him, trammeled by a fellow captive's jealous chains, her inner ice melts, yielding to the sweet torment of gravity's exquisite duress, bending and quivering, buckling and shivering. 4 parallel scars rake down her belly, left by a celestial tiger's claws. She bleeds ice mist and torrents, trailing veils of crane down behind her, shattered wings. She wraps herself in her mist, pressing snow to her breast to conceal her ravaged, pockmarked skin, bleeds out her essence to the void, heedless in her ecstasy, leaving a trail of frozen tears behind. Those feathers that do return to her as she's slowly devoured by her lover's ungentle embrace fall back to her skin like knives of cold stone. Self-destroying, self-creating, blinded by her rapture, she whirls around her beloved entranced, while, within her laboring core, dragons struggle to birth themselves through the Caesarean cuts left by the tiger's surgical claws, strive to shatter the shell of their mother, their ice-white egg. The heat within her heart that engendered them will, in time, spell their dissolution, when she gives herself up to her lover entirely, dissolves herself and spreads out as a final shimmering ring of transitory ice. And so, with each pass of the orbital dance, the universe pauses, waiting to see what kind of fabulous monsters have been born.
And once again, that was Deborah L. Davitt from Houston, Texas, reading her poem Enceladus, and that's from The Gates of Never, also a Finishing Line Press poem, just like she's a poet from Finishing Line Press, just like Kathleen Balma today. So check out her book, The Gates of Never. Let me make sure I don't have anybody else waiting really quick. Okay, well, that looks like it's the show for tonight. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. As always, please do click the like button and share and tell your friends to watch this if you enjoyed it. We visit with a new poet every Tuesday night, except for Christmas and New Year's Eve, which I didn't want to actually do a show then. But 50 weeks a year, either we're going to visit with a new poet every night. Next week, as I already mentioned, we will visit with Michael T. Young. That is February 4th. 2020 already, and Michael T. Young has appeared in 2 issues of Rattle, and I'm looking forward to checking out his book, The Infinite Doctrine of Water. And that's all for tonight. Hope you have a good week, and I will see you next Tuesday. Good night.